What's up, folks? Welcome back to another edition of SHU Outdoors. My name is Mick, and I'm your host. And today we're going to do a deep dive on how our correctional facilities and county jails have become proxy mental health facilities. That's right, proxy mental health facilities. Prisoners oftentimes come out of these facilities worse off than they were when they went in. Now, a lot of people is going to say, well, he's a prisoner. Heck with him. You know what I say to all those people? If your son or daughter gets locked up, I hope they get exposed to the same exact torture that you want other people to get exposed to. You got no mercy on people. If you're one of these law and order, lock them up, give them nothing, make them suffer, make them do it out. They got nothing coming. It doesn't matter if he's in jail for jaywalking or smoking a joint. He's a prisoner. Give him the business. I hope your son or daughter or nephew or mother or cousin, I hope they end up in a jail, and I hope they're subject to it. Not just for the sake of having another human being exposed to that type of treatment, but maybe it'll put your idea of crime and punishment in proper context. A lot of horrible things happen in prisons all over the country, and a blind eye is turned to it because, oh, well, they're just nothing but prisoners. Who cares? I care. That's who cares. Now let's get into it. This right here is one of my, I don't know this individual, but he's a homie out of New York. He has a YouTube channel called The Conservative Felon, and he does a lot of really good content and commentary. I would like to do reaction videos of, like, say, 60 days in and stuff, but YouTube is so restrictive and using clips and stuff, it's almost impossible to do. I think it takes away from the content that is on YouTube. Now, it's one thing if someone is singing a song that belongs to another band and they claiming it's theirs and everybody knows it's not. But if you're just providing commentary on clips, it's very hard to do it with a 3, 5, 7-minute clip. It's almost not really even worth the time and the trouble to even bother with it. But this right here is a different case scenario, and I want to hear what this gentleman's got to say, and I definitely intend to provide commentary along the way. I'm not trying to bite his clip. I'm trying to add value to it.
How's it going, people? How's it going? Welcome back. Thank you for coming to the channel. Thank you for subscribing. I appreciate you. This video, if many of you heard, it's been in the tabloids, it's been in the media, especially the past 48 hours, about correctional officers who beat to death a prisoner in Marcy Correctional Facility by the name of Robert Brooks. And so we're going to talk.
Now, this case occurred a couple of years ago. The reason why I'm bringing it to the viewing audience's attention now is because this wasn't an isolated incident, like it happened one time and it's never happened before or since. No, it was an ongoing thing, not only in Marcy Correctional Facility where it happened, but in other prisons all around New York State and all around the country, especially down here in Florida. These county jails down here in Florida are really, really horrible. They need to be remodeled, redesigned. A whole nother thought process needs to go in them because you have a lot of individuals that suffer from mental health disorders. And if someone's suffering from a mental health disorder and rubs feces all over themselves, the proper response is not to gas them and go in and beat them. They're obviously suffering from a mental trauma. They need treatment. They need help, not to be beat, gassed, and tortured.
A little bit about that in a brief video. I was never in Marcy Correctional Facility, but I was directly across the street in a facility called Mid-State Correction.
I was also in Mid-State Correctional Facility. I did 3 years there. What a shithole that was.
Facility, and Marcy always had a reputation for the officers being abusive.
I absolutely did.
Few facilities that have that reputation.
And on an interesting side note, Marcy has something called the two-man box, also referred to as a SHU 200, right across the street. If you get in trouble, they would send you over there, and you would have a cellie in the chute. And I've had the misfortune of being in several of those shoot 200s all around. They're spread all around New York State. Marcy happens to have one also. They had a big right in Marcy Correctional Facility, I'm going to say about 20-something years ago. A lot of people got hurt. But contrary to the viewing public's opinion, you never just have a prison right for the sake of, hey, let's have a prison right. No, that's not the way it works. In order for there to be a prison right, a riot, there has to be serious abuse occurring, because prisoners would rather just go about their business and live their life and go to program, go to the yard and work out and watch some TV. So if it gets to a point where the whole prison decides to have a riot, it's because the prison's being run really, really, really bad.
And they can be abusive in any facility. But Marcy Correctional Facility had the reputation for officers who were abusive to the prison population. So Robert Brooks was beat to death on December 10th by approximately 14 correctional officers. 14 on one. Okay.
And the guy was handcuffed.
12 years. A black man serving 12 years for stabbing his girlfriend. And he was, I think, 2017, may have been convicted.
I think it's important to note something. The guy was sentenced to prison by a judge, okay? He wasn't to 12 years. I don't know all the facts of the case, but he was sentenced to 12 years in prison, okay? He wasn't sentenced to the death penalty. He wasn't sentenced to be beaten, tortured every day while he was in prison. The guy probably suffered from mental health disorders that wasn't properly being treated. As this unwinds, he was beat to death in the medical infirmary. So medical staff was standing around watching this happen. Thankfully, at least somebody recorded it and released the footage to the public. What happened to Robert Brooks didn't happen in an isolated bubble. This has been going on for years and years and years and decades. Okay? It's just that technology has outpaced the police and the COs in certain regards. And a lot of this stuff is coming to light. Let's get back into it.
In 2017. And he was transferred to Marcy Correctional Facility just a day or two prior to the incident happening. So I would like to find out why he was transferred from whatever facility he was in. Because if he was transferred with a bad wire, and what that means is the facility that sent him to Marcy may have sent a message that he had a problem with officers, or the officers didn't like him, and that message traveled with him. I'm just speculating. That message traveled with him to Marcy, and then the Marcy correctional officers may have gotten their payback on Mr. Brooks. These were 14 officers that did this to him. There's a video online. You can see the video online. And part of these officers were the beat-up squad, what they call the beat-up squad. And the beat-up squad, there was one of them in Attica, too. They have different names, or a group of officers that are known.
I was in Attica also. And in Attica Correctional Facility, if you can call it a correctional facility, it should just be named Attica State Prison, because it's a real bad place. And when I was there, there was no cameras whatsoever inside the facility. Yeah, they had cameras outside for the perimeter security, but there was no cameras inside the facility. All right, they would routinely beat prisoners mercilessly. It was so bad that the state had to issue a gray pair of gloves, and that's the only pair of gloves that the COs could wear at Attica State Prison. I'm not going to call it a correctional facility. Attica State Prison, because there was a beat-up crew that wore black gloves with lead in the knuckles, knockout gloves, and they would just roam around, and if you did anything somebody didn't like and they called word, they would just come to your cell, take you out in the hallway, beat the living crap out of you, and throw you back in the cell. Medical staff didn't care. You can't tell me the warden didn't know what was going on. Of course they knew what was going on. They were turning a blind eye to it too. And the DA in the county where Attica State Prison is located, he knows what's going on too. Nobody's doing anything about it. All right, because it's the good old boy system. Screw the good old boy system. That's what I think about the good old boy system. Good old boy system means nothing to me. All right, I'm not a liberal or a conservative. I'm an independent, and I think the way I think. Okay, now I'm reasonable, and I'm willing to listen to other people who have valuable input, but I am an expert on corrections. I've been in Attica, I've been in Rikers Island, I've been in Sing Sing. I did almost 15 years in New York State. I know the run-ins inside and out, okay, of a state prison, and I did 10 years at the United States Penitentiary level in the Feds. I know how that system works too. I could go in and reform most of these prisons and county jails. Now, listen, I'm not saying that if you're in prison and you committed a crime, you shouldn't be punished for what you did. The punishment is the prison sentence that you received. You're going to be removed from society for 5 years. The judge never said that you're going to be removed from society for 5 years and be treated like a dog and be beat and tortured every day. That's not a part of the person's sentence. The sentence is 5 years or 10 years or 20 years or 6 months. The judge never threw nothing in there about being beat, tortured, or unalived. That was never part of Mr. Brooks' sentence. And it's not a part of any other prisoner's sentence too, unless they were sentenced to the ultimate punishment. But even then, you don't beat them and torture them every day while they're waiting for that final punishment to be handed out. Okay, you feed them, you give them rec, because you're better than what they were. If you're going to call yourself a correctional professional, act like it. Don't act like a savage and start emulating the behavior of the worst individuals in your correctional facility. You have an obligation to be a professional correctional professional. And if you want to be treated like that, act like that. Now, I'm not saying every CO is a bad guy. I'm not saying every warden is a bad guy. Some of them have good intentions. But when they get in there and they realize the system's totally broke, they're not paying correctional officers, they're understaffed, you can't get any good people to want to be a correctional officer. That's why you have so much corruption at these states, especially southern states. They pay them, what, like $20 an hour to go and work in a horrible maximum security prison, and you realize why you got so much contraband in here. You don't pay them nothing, and you're hiring bad people to be quote-unquote correctional professionals. You do have a few decent ones here and there. I will say that. But they're far and few between. Far and few between. And my expert opinion, I'm a correctional professional, okay? Okay, I know more about corrections than most COs could ever hope to learn. You've been working as a CO for 3 years. How do you know more than me? I did 25 years in prisons all over at the federal level, all over the country, and almost 15 years in one of the biggest correctional state systems in the country. I would be willing to bet $10 to a piece of chewed bubble gum. I'm a lot more informed than you are if you've only been a correctional officer for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 or 15 years.
To beat up prisoners. You know what I mean? They don't tolerate anything at all. It may be the slightest of infractions, and these officers decide to beat prisoners up for those infractions, you know, which is not only wrong, it's violent and it's against the law.
And what made a correctional officer judge, jury, and executioner? That's not your job. Your job is to come in and pass mail out, pass food out, and maintain the good order of facility. Maintaining the good order of facility has nothing to do with beating people while they have handcuffs on and taking matters into your own hands.
You know, they do it all the time in many facilities. The important thing here is that he was handcuffed. See, this prisoner was handcuffed in the hospital when they did this to him, or in the infirmary. And there is no excuse for beating to death a handcuffed prisoner. There is no excuse. If a prisoner is not handcuffed, then maybe there could be some justification. The officer says, listen, he attacked us, I was in fear for my life, or he was beating me up, or he had a weapon, or he's a violent felon and he's attacking me, and I had no choice but to defend myself, and I had to take it.
And a lot of time that's BS too. They'll say, stop resisting, and the guy's not resisting while they're giving him knees and elbows, 4 or 5 of them. All right? I'm a firm believer that violence is just like the common cold. Once it's unleashed in an environment, it's almost impossible to stamp out. Almost impossible. So the key is never let it get unleashed in an environment. But once it is, sometimes you gotta fight fire with fire.
Life during the course of that, right? Then it could become justifiable when you look at circumstances. It's of course possible. I've seen prisoners attack officers with a knife, and in that case, the officer has the right to do whatever he has to do to defend himself. I got you, but not a handcuffed prisoner.
Absolutely not. I agree with you.
Right there. He's handcuffed behind his back. He's no threat.
And medical.
There's 14 officers in the room. They could have overpowered him, held him down anytime they wanted. They were kicking him.
You could have held him down without kicking him, beating him, hitting him.
They were kicking him in the face. They were punching him in the face. There was also sergeants, which is a rank above the officer,
who was co-signing
at the time that it was taking place.
That's not a new thing.
They didn't do anything to intervene. There was a nurse, at least one nurse known to be in the room. She did not do anything to intervene. These people need to be held liable as well. They need to be charged.
I hope every one of them gets 25 years to life and has to do it in the hole, because they'll never put them in general population. Oh, no. They'd be got immediately, all right? I hope every one of them gets 25 years to life and has to do it suffering in the hole, just like they made countless prisoners do without a second thought, went outside, went in the office, put a big chew of tobacco in, kicked back, turn the thing on, and everybody around you suffering, okay? I'm a huge proponent of rehabilitation, okay? You would nip recidivism in the bud, but this is the truth. People they talk rehabilitation, but they don't want rehabilitation. The prison guard unions and the corrections, generally speaking, all around the country, they want more people to get locked up because, see, that's job security. If you start rehabilitating people, they can come out and they can take advantage of opportunities, and you have programs in place as a society. Well, those people won't re-offend. They'll become law-abiding, tax-paying citizens, which should be the ultimate goal, and allegedly is. But trust me, after doing 25 years in prison, I can tell you the game is, let's make these people worse. Let's create monsters. Let's let them back into society. Let them go out and do something crazy, and then we can convince the public to pass even harder laws. That'll teach them. Then we can hire more COs, build more prisons, companies that make metal detectors, wands, urine tests. All of them make money off the system. Okay, it's all a big kickback scheme. By no means am I saying that there should not be prisons. You have people roaming the streets that need to be confined because they're a real danger to society. I'm not some bleeding heart liberal, but I'm also a humane person, all right? The only time I'm unhumane is if people are being unhumane to me, okay? And then I don't fight fire with fire. I fight fire with water. I put the fire out, make sure it stays out, put it down, and make sure it stays down. But I'm a very humane, kind, decent person. And when you have someone who is, quote unquote, a career criminal, it's obvious the individual has experienced some kind of trauma in their life. It's obvious that, yes, they may need to be withheld from society to protect society. I get it. No one needs to convince me of that. I understand. I've come across a handful of people. Most of the people that I've come across in prison, they could have been rehabilitated, and they could have been released after, a number of years and come back in society and be law-abiding, tax-paying citizens. I do agree there is some crimes that people commit. Maybe they can't be rehabilitated, and maybe they have to stay incarcerated for the rest of their life. But I think those crimes are few and far between. And we could all name off the crimes that come right to the top of the list. We don't have to get into that right now, but I understand the need for prisons, okay? And I get it. But if you lock someone up, you should treat that person the way you would want me, okay, a 280-pound man, okay, to treat your daughter if she was in prison. You know, would you want someone taking advantage of your daughter? Would you want someone kicking your son if he had handcuffs on? Especially when you knew deep down he was a drug addict and he had mental health disorders. He may have did something criminal. And I'm not saying that should be excused. There has to be a price to be paid. But when you lock someone up, you treat them humanely, you treat them decently, and you make an effort to rehabilitate the person. So that way, when they're released after 6 months or 6 years or 10 years or 12 years or 5 years, whenever they're released back in the community, and they have an opportunity to be a good neighbor, be a good citizen, be a tax-paying citizen, and be a good person. When you take someone, you put them in a horrible environment, and then you do basically everything in your ability as a society and as a county jail, not you personally, but the individuals you vote into office. They pass these laws and these bills and these correctional doctrines that the correctional facility has to run under. I'm all about rehabilitation. Remember, someone's prison sentence is being in the prison, being removed from society for a certain amount of time, being carteled in your freedoms because you've been found guilty of committing a crime. Part of that punishment isn't to be driven crazy, okay? That was never part of the punishment. The judge didn't sentence the individual to that. Why would you want to put somebody in prison for 5, 10, 12 years, 15 years, do everything in your power to ensure that when this person gets out of prison, they will be much, much, much worse than they were when they came into prison? The goal should be how not to continue to commit criminal activity. There's a better way, okay? I'm going to give you a little example. When I was in Collins Correctional Facility. Now, I give New York State a lot of kudos in a lot of ways. Rikers Island is the county jail for New York City, all right? That is a completely different circumstance than upstate New York. And it depends on where you go upstate. And this guy's going to get into it in a minute. I'm going to finish letting him speak. I got my GED at Collins Correctional Facility, and I will say it's a correctional facility. And there's a designation between the two types of prisons. Man, I had never written an essay. You know, I started going to prison, juvenile hall. They didn't care anything. I'm 56 years old. So when I started going through South Carolina Department of Juvenile Justice, you know, they made a show of putting you in the school, but they didn't care if you didn't learn anything. And it was a pretty rough place, you know. And I would say it damaged me a lot. And it took me many years to get over that trauma. Finally, when many years had passed and I found myself in Collins Correctional Facility in upstate New York over by Buffalo, Rochester area, I said, you know what, man? I want to get a GED. Now, a lot of people may make fun. Oh, he's got a GED. Okay, look, fair enough. Okay, you can have that joke. But, man, I had never written an essay. I didn't know how to divide a fraction. I could read and write and, you know, do basic mathematics, but like anything more than that, it was beyond me. I didn't know what I was looking at. I never had anybody to teach me. I didn't understand the importance of learning. So I went and I studied and I studied and I studied. I wrote like 1,000 essays, divided up 1,000,000 fractions, integers, algebra, geometry. You know what, man? It took me a year. And this is the truth. And I earned that GED. Nobody gave it to me. And it wasn't easy, not for me. But when I passed it as a class Victorian. All right? Now, in New York State, the warden, not that I'd want to shake their hand either, but they will never shake your hand or give you a pound. That's like a line that don't get crossed. It doesn't matter how cool the CO is. They're never going to give you a pound. But if you get your GED, they shake everybody's hand because it's a really big deal. They place an emphasis on treatment and rehabilitation. Now, you got the dark side of New York State also, and what I mean by that, the corruption, the beatings, all that really does happen. But they, as a system as a whole, they do make a real effort to treat people and provide a degree of rehabilitation. That's the reason why Rikers Island is a rough place, because it's a county jail. It's not like a state prison. When you get upstate New York, they do offer a lot of vocationals. I earned that GED. I graduated valedictorian of that class. I would have to say it was one of the most prideful, because I earned that, man. I tested higher than anybody in the class. And there was a class because Collins has Collins 1 and Collins 2, and they have a GED program in both of those. And those teachers, they have competitions who can get who the best results or who can pass the most students. It's a big deal, you know. And yeah, I earned that, man. So you can make fun of my GED all you want to, but I can write one heck of an essay. I can do integers, algebra, geometry. I learned it from the ground up. It's ingrained forever. And because of that, I was able to become a top-notch legal beagle, because now I really learned how to write properly. Okay, I've won many, many cases. I've helped people give years and years back of their prison sentence, beat all kind of prison disciplinary reports on all kind of technicalities. I know exactly how to go in and find the exact rule, the law that they're supposed to abide by, and show the court how they're not abiding by it. And if the court don't do the right thing, I know how to appeal it and keep the case alive. That is rooted. And, you know, hey, I, as an American citizen, have a right to do that, you know. Look, man, I got out of prison and totally rebuilt my life. I did have a lot of help. I got married, became a law-abiding citizen, and I attribute that a lot to some of the programs that I took in New York State. Let's get back into it. Let's see if we can. I didn't mean to go off on a tyrant.
Charged with accessory to murder. Anyone that put hands on them, in my opinion, should be charged with murder. Anyone who was in the room and just watching it transpire should be accessory to murder, because they were an accessory. They were there.
Hell yeah, brother, I agree with you.
Stop it at all, and they had an obligation to stop it, because anyone that works in the hospital and all the offices, right, they are supposed to protect and serve the well-being of even the prisoner.
Yeah, because they're law.
They didn't do this.
You know, in that law,
there's 4 lawsuits
enforcement family
that I know of already against these officers. That
hope they all get sued for everything they got.
They already have 4 prior lawsuits. They've done it before. They've done it many times before. 28 prisoners were killed in 2022 from officers. 28 in that year.
None of those prisoners was sentenced to that.
That were said to be accidents, right? So I never talk much of this about in my videos. You know, I try and stay calm a little bit, right? And I said that you can meet some good officers along the way. There's always a few good officers along the way, but they get a gang mentality. You know what I mean? And they start treating prisoners in ways they would never treat them if it was a one-on-one situation, right? And you encounter this all the time in the Department of Corrections. I've encountered many officers like that, right? And I try to, they think they're a tough guy, and they disrespectful, and they abuse the inmates verbally. They abuse them physically. They abuse them mentally. They abuse them emotionally, because they've been given a position of power, and they look at the prisoner as a piece of shit. Okay, and I can
not as a fellow human being.
Prisoners committed a crime, whether they pled guilty, whether they were found guilty, they're doing their time. They committed their crime, and they're doing their time. And the people in authority abusing their authority only creates animosity in the prisons. That's all it does. That all it does is make a man want to get out of prison and strike back. But it also teaches them that those in authority are full of shit. There's no other way to look at that. You say, look, they incarcerated me for breaking the law, right? They incarcerated me for breaking the rules of society. And now I come into the prison system.
And they're all breaking the law and the rules.
Breaking the rules themselves. They're breaking the laws themselves. So what does that teach the group of prisoners that are in there?
Be a better criminal.
Animosity. It makes them want to strike back.
Not go straight.
And there's it's uncalled for, right? The correctional officers need much better training. They need much better social skills. As I've said in another video, a lot of these prisons are built in the middle of farmland. In New York State, they're in upstate New York.
Real hillbillies.
Were employed as farmers. A lot of them, before the prison was built in the community, which then employed the men and women of the community. So before, and my point is this, is that before that they were farmers. And what type of interactions did they have with the majority of minorities from Brooklyn, the Bronx, Queens, Harlem? Now they have all these people coming from the 5 boroughs. They're given power over them, right? They see them as pieces of garbage. And when you study psychology, as I said many times, this is a dangerous scenario that gets created. The officers do this all the time. I had an officer do it to me. A piece of shit officer in Attica Correctional Facility. Right? He used to mess with me all the time. Not just me, with everyone. He did stupid stuff too. He had no brain. He would pull the pillow out from under your head while you were sleeping and laugh about it. He'd constantly make derogatory comments about prisoners. He'd search your cell and rip it apart, unnecessarily rough, throwing everything around for no reason. He'd search your cell when you weren't supposed to have your cell searched, just because he felt like doing it. He planted weapons on people. He would get can tops from tuna fish cans, fold them and plant them in your cell. So this guy's messing with me.
You were legally allowed to have canned foods at that time.
A couple of incidents, and I was getting tight. I was getting fed up with it. And
commissary packages.
One day I was on the phone with my wife, who was dying of cancer. This is the straw that broke the camel's back with this officer. He was my company officer, so I was subjected to him all the time. He worked the company that I locked in, and this is Attica was real serious. If you touch an officer, they'll possibly kill you. You know what I mean? You might not survive. Right?
Now, one thing I will say between
his wife,
say, New York State Prison, let me cut you off, big dog, but in between New York State Prison like Attica, Sing Sing, opposed to a United States Penitentiary, things they do there, they would never be able to get away with in the United States Penitentiary. If they would have did that to Robert Brooks in the United States Penitentiary, no matter how long they locked the jail down, when that jail come off a lockdown, officers would be attacked by black prisoners. It would not be forgotten and swept up under the rug. There would have been severe consequences. So I just think that's another point I want to drive home. And I've said it on this show before, I'm going to say it again. I know every state has rough prisons, and there's dangerous people, intelligent people in those prisons. But, a United States Penitentiary is really just a completely different level of intelligence, mayhem, chaos, violence. Completely different level, man, because you're dealing with the worst of the worst of all 50 states and all the U.S. territories. So it's just a completely different level. I'm going to let Big Dog get into it.
Passing away from cancer. She's in the hospital. I'm talking to her, and I'm on the phone crying. And this officer starts messing with me while I'm on the phone. He's taking his nightstick and poking me. And I turned around. I told him, "Yo, stop touching me right now. I'm on the phone, man." He keeps messing with me. He keeps messing with me, right? So I got to hang up the phone and go down to my cell. I go down to my buddy Louis' cell, and I'm talking to Louis about this officer. I'm like, yo, listen, this guy keeps messing with me. I'm going to lose control on him. I says, he's really driving me crazy. And as I'm talking to Louis, the officer shows up behind me and pokes me with the nightstick again. Well, at that point, I turned around, I grabbed the officer, pulled him inside of the cell, slammed him on the bed, put my hand on his neck, and I told him, stop fucking with me, man. Louis is screaming, not in here, not in here. You don't want it happening.
Yeah, because here's the thing. The only reason why that punk CO was doing that, because Attica is a serious joint, and they have been known to unalive many prisoners there. There was a huge right there. You walk down the hallways in Attica, when you go through the fence, you can see the rut mark still in the hallway where they took the mini forklifts and crashed through the gates. It has a huge metal shop there. They make all the metal lockers, the metal beds, all that for not just New York State prisons, but prisons all over the country. It's called Corecraft. I worked in that metal shop when I was in Attica. But back to the point, the only reason why that punk CO was doing that is because he knew the reputation of what the other officers would do to you if you beat his ass. All right? So he said, well, these guys won't do nothing to me because they know we got the black glove crew and they're known for unaliving people. So I'm just a little punk, but I'm just going to, this is a big badass cracker out of NYC, right? You can look at him and tell he's a one-man wrecking crew, homeboy. That CO would have never did that to that man on the street. Never. Well, because he's in here, he's got a nightstick. That's another thing about the feds. They don't carry nightsticks in the block. It will quickly be taken from them and they'd be beat with their own nightstick. They do carry mace, but they stand way back and usually don't spray until they pull the pin and they hear the other people running because it's a very serious place. But the administration knew this guy as this. It wasn't his first day in the jail. He had a reputation for doing that. He just spoke on it. Other officers knew what he was doing. Instead of pulling him to the side and them checking him, this man had to check him and probably go to what? Let's find out what happened.
His cell, you know, and I told the officer, I said, listen to me right now. And I was looking him dead in his eyes. I said, I'm telling you right now that the prisoner officer thing is going to go out the window. You understand? Like, I'm going to treat you like I would treat someone on the street before I was incarcerated. So I'm telling you right now.
Beat your fucking face in.
Me again, if you ever touch me again, prisoner officer thing doesn't exist anymore. I said, I'm going to fucking kill you. You understand me? Don't touch me again. Don't harass me again. Don't bother me again. That guy never said 2 words to me ever again. You have officers like that purposely go out of their way to harass people and make their life hell, you know, and these guys are trying to do their time. A lot of them are trying to do their time. So, and which
become
brings
a
me
better
back to
person.
Robert Brooks. I'm sorry for getting hyped up on the story, but like I said,
I got to wrap it up. I wish I could go on, but before this episode ends, I hope Robert Brooks is rested in peace. Yeah, he committed a crime. And, you know, it was a bad crime, and he definitely deserved to be placed in prison for what he did. I'm not going to argue that point. The judge sentenced him to 12 years. He didn't sentence him to be treated like a dog. He didn't sentence him to be beat, tortured, unalive by people that are in the law enforcement community people. This is not the first time this happened. It's happened on the streets. With regular law enforcement, and it also happens in prison. I'm not saying every law enforcement or CO officer is bad, but when you have a culture of violence that's just like the common cold, it takes over the department. It takes over the correctional facility on the behalf of the prisoners and also the staff. Law enforcement. I'm gonna get this in the wind. Hey, but I tell you what, I really appreciate your views, and if you haven't liked or subscribed yet, I really would appreciate it if you think about doing so. It really helped the channel out so much, and so I'm gonna get another episode to you real soon. But until then, stay up. Peace.